Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spinning Back Click, where each week on MMA Junkie, we take you on a quick spin through the week's big MMA news. I'm Simon Head, and this week I'm joined by MMA Junkies Farah Hannoun, as well as the dynamic duo from the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada, MMA Junkie Radio's own Gorgeous George and Goze. Let's kick things off, guys, with the main event at UFC on ESPN Plus 33 on Saturday night, where Alexander Rakic surged into the title picture at 205 pounds with a dominant victory over Anthony Lionheart-Smith. Now, we already know that Jan Blachowicz and Dominic Reyes are going to do battle for the belt at UFC 253. And we also know that Thiago Santos and Glover Teixeira are set to face off in a bout that may well determine the next contender. So, with plenty of options still on the table at 205 pounds, put on your matchmaking hats and book Rakic's next bout for me. Who should he face next as he looks to position himself for a shot at 205 pound gold? We will put 2 minutes on the clock to kick things off. George, lead us off, my friend.
Okay, so I think it's similar to what I was saying last week. The winner of this fight, Rakic and Smith, I think should have been very vocal in welcoming Rumble Johnson back. You know, Rumble's going to obviously have to wait about another 5 months or so. I think he's been in that USADA pool for about a month now since the announcement that he's coming back. I believe that's what I heard. And he'll probably fight early in 2021. Why not be the man that greets him? He was a contender when he left. I think we all consider him a contender now. Get that one out of the way. You know what I mean? Off 3-year notice, yeah, that's when I'll take Rumble if I'm going to face him. Because right now, like you said, the winner of Teixeira and and Santos is next.
Absolutely. Goze, what do you reckon? Where would you throw him in next?
Man, I don't know very many human beings on this planet that are going to actually ask for Rumble Johnson. So I don't see that happening. I would say maybe like the winner of Johnny Walker and Ryan Spahn would be a good place. But really, you're just holding your spot because, like George said, you know, Glover and Santos, that guy's probably going to be next for the winner of the title match. So it's really kind of a placeholder. I like the idea of Rumble, and that makes sense. I just don't see very many people wanting to do that.
Yeah, he's an exciting fighter, Rakic. So who would you pair him with, Farah?
I'd probably go with Yuri Prochaska. I know you might be killing a future star or a future contender when putting those two together, but I just think that those guys, Yuri's had one fight, but he had a statement win over Volkanovski. It was an emphatic knockout. I don't think anybody's ever finished Volkan that way. And he's a rising champion. He's an experienced fighter as well. So I think him and Rakic could determine kind of the next contender. And you never know with performances these days if they can get them booked up pretty fast that one of them could end up leapfrogging the winner of Teixeira and Santos, even though that seems like the fight that's going to determine the number one contender. The sport's all about momentum and performances. So if they can get them back in there, or if they fight later on, then they could get the next crack. But I think that would be a very entertaining fight. It would also give Yuri the opportunity he deserves, and it'll be a big fight for Rakic too.
Yeah, seems a long time ago that people were complaining that the 205-pound division was the boring division in the UFC. It is all happening at light heavyweight. Now, for every winner, there has to be a loser, and unfortunately, that was Anthony Smith on Saturday night, who found himself on the losing end of things. His post-fight comments suggested that he's going to sit down and take stock of his career before making a call on what direction he takes next. It kind of opens the door to a possible return to the middleweight division, which could be on the cards. But is that the right decision for him, or should he stay at 205, given how good his form was when he initially moved up from that middleweight division? So what would you do if you were advising him, guys? Where would you tell him to compete next? We'll put 3 minutes on the clock for this one. Goze, you can go first.
Well, I think the older you get, the tougher it is to go down and wait and try these types of things, even though he did have a career at 185 for a while. He's been successful at 205, and I do think there are moments in his 205 career that you can point to where maybe physically he was pushed around a little bit by some of these guys. But for the most part, I think he has the tools physically to compete here. I think his problems just come mentally, really. He is yet to have that performance where he can put all of those great tools that we see from other fights together into one fight. So right now, definitely, I think we can all agree, time is something that he needs to take off. And in that time, maybe that's a good time to go down to the PI and figure out how he could maybe give 185 one more shot and see how that works. Because physically, if you look at the champion in that division and some of the contenders, he can battle with those guys, and he wouldn't really have to start at the bottom and work his way up. So I would say maybe give 185 one more shot.
Yeah, do you prefer him at 85 or 205, Farah?
I actually agree with Goze here. I think because he sounded a little deflated, and I think the idea of new life, yes, the weight cut is a concern, and perhaps you should go to the PI and assess things. But I feel like at 185, because he did, I think Thiago Santos was the loss he had that made him move up. But prior to that, he wasn't fighting those big names. You have the Chris Weidmans, you have the Luke Rockhold, who he's been going back and forth with. I think those fights would really motivate him. And at the same time, because he's a former title challenger, because he's got the name, he wouldn't really have to work his way up the middleweight division. So I feel like kind of what Jose Aldo did by moving down to 35, he did get big opportunities out of that. And it kind of gives Anthony like new life and new motivation. And I think just because of the way he sounded talking about reassessing things, that maybe a new chapter being back to 85 is going to kind of motivate him and give him those matchups and opportunities that are going to reignite the fire in him.
What do you reckon, George? He's been away from 185 for a while, so it could be a nice fresh change for him if he moves back down again.
Yes, and he said it in the post-fight interview. I mean, he really looked down, like he knew those cheat days, there's not going to be many of them. He said it's a lifestyle change, and he's just going to have to be on point. As the light heavyweight, he was a title contender. He got to a title fight. As a middleweight, he didn't have that type of success. Now, to be fair, he's a lot better now. So perhaps if he's going to drop, yeah, do it now, I suppose. Now might be a good time, especially because he's a little bit out of the picture at light heavyweight. With the back-to-back losses. So yeah, do it now, see how that goes. But don't close the door. It's nice to have those options. Don't close the door. You can still come back as a light heavyweight, pack on some muscle, and then compete and see what happens then. I mean, he's got some quality wins at light heavyweight, and some of those might be relevant as we unpack this division. That's literally, it's got new birth now with Jones out of the way.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what Anthony Smith does with the next chapter of his MMA career. Right, guys, let's switch gears and throw things forward a little bit and look at that UFC lightweight title unification fight between Khabib Nurmagomedov and interim champ Justin Gaethje. But rather than talking about his upcoming fight, the majority of headlines about Khabib right now have been about him talking about potential matchups with Conor McGregor and George St. Pierre. So when you see comments like that from Khabib talking about GSP and Conor, does that raise any alarm bells or red flags for you? Is there any concern that Khabib might not be fully focused on Gaethje? And especially given everything else that's been going on in Khabib's life right now, does that make him perhaps the most vulnerable he's been in his UFC career as he gets set to face the highlight next time out? What do you reckon? 3 minutes on the clock for this. Farah, what do you think?
I think because he's talking about the end of his career coming soon, 30-0 is such a nice number for him to round things off, like in terms of his career. So I think he gets asked a lot about it just because 30-0 is really close. And George St. Pierre is a fight he's been wanting for a while. But I think Khabib is kind of like that. He's a confident guy. Like back in the day, he used to get on the mic and be like, I'll smash both guys on the same night. He's just that kind of guy. I don't think he's overlooking Gaethje. Is there a lot on his mind? Sure, of course, with the passing of his father, he's going to want to honor his legacy. So I do believe he's going to be super motivated for a guy like Gaethje, because on paper, Gaethje is probably his toughest test to date. I mean, especially he talks about the folk style wrestling as well, and the power, of course, that he has in his hands. So I don't think Khabib's overlooking him. Is there a lot going on? Sure, of course. I think with the passing of his father, and I do believe that he wants to honor his legacy. So he understands how big that fight is, considering that would be the 29-0, and if he wants to get to that 30-0, he knows the end is near in terms of his career. So I think that yeah, there's a little bit of distractions, but I don't think he's necessarily overlooking Gaethje.
What do you make of it, George? It's been a really tough year for Khabib. How's he going to move forward from this?
Yes, very rough year, not just with the passing of his father, but I remember reading that a lot of people from the town that he's from were hit with infections. So I have to imagine it seems like a close-knit community that there's been a lot of sorrow, that he's going to have to bounce back from. But look, Khabib is undefeated. And I think when you're undefeated, you can just roll to the beat of your own drum. There's really nothing we can say, he shoulda, woulda. I mean, when he's gone to a decision, he's smashed. And then obviously when he's gotten his finishes, boom, exclamation points on those statement wins. So Khabib can say whatever he wants, whenever he wants. He is perfect right now. He may be one of the first to retire undefeated, and have the accolades that he did. Go on, Khabib. Do what you got to do. You know what I mean? If you got to throw those fishing lines out there because you want to finish strong and make some money, go ahead and do it. I don't think anybody can say anything to you right now.
Yeah, well said. Goze, do you reckon Gaethje poses the toughest test for Khabib's career?
100%. Justin Gaethje is the biggest threat right now. For many reasons. One is he's just never intimidated by anything. And I think a lot of people that face these top guys like John Jones, like Khabib, they're intimidated before the fight even starts. And that's just not Justin. He never backs down. He hits like an ox. He's got wrestling of his own. Those leg kicks are nasty. I think it's the toughest thing that Khabib will ever see in his career. This is the fight that I think is going to make that legacy. But as far as him overlooking, I mean, look, it's human nature to look towards the future. I'm about to have lunch and I'm already thinking about dinner. I mean, we do it every day, right? But a fight like George St. Pierre, we all know what it does for his legacy, and I think it's okay for him to answer questions about it from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, we're partly to blame, right? We're the guys firing the questions at him.
Yeah.
So, it's a two-edged sword, this whole business. But looking forward to that fight with Justin Gaethje a little bit further down the line. Now, guys, it feels like we're seeing a bit of a changing of the guard in the UFC right now. Some of the established stars are approaching the end of their careers or announcing their retirement, while a host of other talented young stars are working their way up the UFC ladder. So what I want to know from you guys is, taking a look at that latest crop of talent moving their way up the UFC ladder, who do you see standing the test of time and eventually walking away from the sport with legend status at the end of their career? We'll put 2 minutes on the clock, so we'll keep it short and sweet. George, lead us off.
Right. So here, I'm going to say there's a couple. Hopefully the other two don't, I didn't take theirs, but it's an interesting question. I really Deiveson Figueiredo is somebody I would have said before he got the title. I really thought he showed some promise, but he got it already, so that's kind of low-hanging fruit. But I like Cyril Gane at heavyweight. He's only, I think, at 6-0. So can we still call him a prospect? I don't know, but he's still working his way up. Needs a lot more fights, a lot more experience, but I really like his skills. And then Tatiana Suarez is just somebody that's kind of been left behind a little bit. She hasn't fought in over a year, and can she get over those neck injuries? Hopefully. I think something similar happened to Tito Ortiz, but I think she's a terror at strawweight. So those are my two.
Excellent stuff. Goze, who's on your list?
Well, I think right now with the COVID era, the way things are, it's just very hard to promote fighters because it doesn't get to simmer. We're moving on to the next card every week. So really, I think what you got to do is you got to take somebody that's already had a little bit of legend status just somewhere else. And that's Michael Chandler. Already achieved the highest that he could in Bellator. Possibly could be the next signing here in the UFC. A couple wins and then having a UFC belt. I think that's going to do a lot. And I think that's going to make him a legend.
Yeah, I'd love to see Michael Chandler in the UFC mixing it at 155. Farah, who's on your list?
I'd say one that hasn't been mentioned, Zabit Magomedsharipov, just because he's so well-rounded. He's such a talented fighter, good everywhere. He's so comfortable in there. Obviously, there's questions about his cardio and 5 rounds. That's going to come. He knows. He's shown that he slowed down a little bit, but he's just so unbelievably skilled everywhere with the grappling, with the submissions, with the striking. He's loose. He's confident. I just feel like he's got all the makings of a big star. Obviously, the backing from his country. Like, he's just got all the makings to be a world champion. Obviously, he has to address the whole cardio thing. And maybe his fight with Yair is not going to be a 5-rounder, but he knows that if he's going to be a world champion, those fights are going to come. So once he addresses those cardio issues, he's just going to be a very hard guy to beat.
Yeah, that featherweight division as well is absolutely stacked. There's so much going on at 145 pounds. Now, that was talking about future legends. Let's talk about current legends, and one man who may well go down as a legend of the sport, or should go down as a legend of the sport, in my opinion. Alistair Overeem returns to action in the main event this weekend at UFC on ESPN Plus 34 when he takes on Augusto Sakai. Now, he's won almost everything there is to win in combat sport except for a UFC title. So bearing that in mind, let's finish with this one. Which UFC fighter currently stands as the best fighter not to have won a UFC title? We'll put 2 minutes on the clock, so keep it short and sweet. Goze, who's yours?
I gotta go with my man Hendo. That spot belongs to him, I believe. I mean, when you look at the things that Dan Henderson has done throughout his career, it's very similar to Alistair Overeem. He's had wins in Japan. He's done Pride. He's done Strikeforce. He's done so many things, and he's won tournaments. That's about as close as you can to winning a UFC belt back then. And he's won tournaments in different organizations. If you look at the hit list, some of the names that we would throw on there are skins on Dan Henderson's wall. So I got to go with Hendo, man. He's been able to do it over a lot of different eras too. So that's the dude.
Yeah, great shout. Farah, who's top of your list?
I'm going to go with Alexander Gustafsson just because he's had the most heartbreaking losses. When you look at his first loss to John Jones, he turned into a superstar. Very rarely do you see someone lose a fight and turn into a superstar. I mean, he took Jones to the brink. Perhaps if you ask Jones, I know in the rematch he got the finish and he made a statement and it was a dominant win. But perhaps if you ask John Jones today who his toughest test was, maybe he'd go with Alexander Gustafsson one, maybe Reyes, maybe Santos. But I just think that Gustafsson, the heartbreaking loss to John Jones, then the heartbreaking loss to Daniel Cormier. I mean, he had Cormier hurt early. It was a super close fight. To have two fights like that for the title, especially guys who are John Jones and Daniel Cormier, legends in the sport, to have come this close to beating them, I think he's kind of has the most heartbreaking losses. So I'd definitely pick him.
Yeah, he's a good, solid nomination. George, who gets your vote?
I'm going to go with Joseph Benavidez. Joe B1 Kenobi. Listen, this guy was 12-2 as a bantamweight, so he held his own, and those two losses came to the same guy. Dominic Cruz, who, by the way, is regarded as one of the greatest bantamweights of all time. Split decision on one of them, by the way. Then he moves to flyweight, where he should have naturally been and where we've known him. That's where the biggest spotlight's been on him, fighting under the UFC banner. Again, split decision loss to an all-time great in Demetrius Johnson. And then the losses to Davis Figueiredo. Those were definitely tough. I have a feeling Figueiredo's going to do a lot of great stuff in his career. So, he came up a little bit short, but man, the skin's on that guy's wall.
Yeah, and shout out to Uriah Faber as well. I think he deserves an honourable mention. But the man who gets my vote is Alistair Overeem. He's got to be at the top of my list. Born right here in England as well, by the way. English-born Alistair Overeem. Let's get him on that list. But that's about all we have time for on Spinning Backclick this week. I just want to say a huge thank you to Farah Hannoun for being on the show this week. And, of course, to Gorgeous George and Goze. Check them out on Sportscaster every Wednesday. And make sure you subscribe to the MMA Junkie Radio podcast to listen to their show twice weekly via your favourite podcasting provider. Finally, a big thank you to you guys out there for checking out Spinning Backclick once again. We've got wall-to-wall coverage all week on MMA Junkie with Contender Series Tuesday night, LFA Friday night, and the UFC, of course, on Saturday night. We got you covered here on MMA Junkie, so keep it locked. And we'll catch up with you again next week.